What's going on, guys? We're back with another Modified Rides podcast. Today, I have someone on that runs not only one of the top custom shops in the country, I'd say, but probably the premier Ford shop. Today, I have Jason from Fat Fender Garage. What's going on, Jason?
Hey, how's it going? Good to be with you, Brandon.
So, you have, in my opinion, probably the premier Ford shop. I guess you do more Fords than you do anything, but you also do other stuff.
We do, and we're trying to push a little bit further on that angle. We enjoy the Fords tremendously. It's kind of that soft place, in your heart. Everybody has a soft place for something, right?
Yeah.
And whether you're Dodge, Chevy, whoever you are, and that's great. It's wonderful. I think it's fun to like joke around with the other, name brand truck stuff, just for fun, but. In a nutshell, though, we actually really appreciate them all, and we like working on all of them, and it's fun. But we are trying to expand that just a little bit more. So we're pushing a little bit more into some Dodges and a little bit more into Chevys nowadays.
So, before we get into where you're currently at now with the shop, let's step
hmm
back and figure out where Jason first got involved with custom vehicles. What was your trigger point?
So, you know, uh, when I was in high school, I would see these friends of mine with their lowered Volkswagen Bugs, that bug scene, that culture, and I thought, man, that's so cool. I want my own. And so I had a Volkswagen Bug in high school, and so it felt like I just worked on it all the time.
Most of them you do.
Like just literally, I was just like, it was one thing after another. But it was fun and I enjoyed that process and kind of designing, creating, we painted it in the home garage and, did all that kind of stuff. And so did all that stuff with my dad, but it wasn't really something that I was like, I had a knack for. I didn't think, and I enjoyed carpentry a little bit more. And so I kind of had gone into like woodworking, carpentry, had done that for a lot of years and still enjoy that today. But it wasn't until I found myself, kind of unemployed, if you will. The housing crisis came 2008, 9. I
Yeah.
found myself unemployed and trying to figure out, what my next venture would be, and it definitely wasn't going to be construction. I knew that, but and so it really just kind of started with purchasing um, an old pickup truck, right, and just tinkering around on it, and then sold it. It was actually one that my father-in-law had bought. It was like an old, advanced design series, 3100,
Yeah.
like a 1953, I think it was. It was like it was purple, had come off an Air Force base, and we just kind of tinkered around on it, fixed it up, and sold it, and made a little bit of money on it, and bought another one, and then we just kept trying to like think of ways of how we could change it and modify it and sell it and make money. So that was kind of what, started it. Now, I wasn't in the culture. I didn't grow up a mechanic. I wasn't in the hot rod scene. I didn't know who the players were. Never heard of the word Dino or Delmo or Porterbuilt or any of those shops and those guys, right? Like um, never heard of Hollywood Hot Rods. The only person that I think I had heard of was Chip Foose. Like he's the legend, and
Yep.
of course Boyd Coddington and those guys, but never really, was in it. And so we're just kind of tinkering around on our own thing, just kind of doing our own thing, and bought a '56 Ford that was mostly painted, and we just had to finish it, and that it was a baby blue, and that kind of began kind of the love affair with the Fords for me. I just felt like that 56 was such an iconic hot rod truck that I just kept buying them and selling them, flipping them, and I just got into this 53 to 56 Ford um, purchasing and flipping scenario for about 2 to 3 years. That's all I did.
And
It's kind
when
of
was this?
this was probably back in 2014, 15.
Okay.
Um,
Not too long ago.
no, not too long ago, and I was just buy, sell, 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 and I'm kind of I have some obsessive, I don't know if I call them disorders, but when I get into something I just want to know everything about it. And
I
so I
think
was
that's called
afraid.
being a car guy. I
Yeah, and
think
I
we're
was
all
afraid if
wired
I
like
got
that.
yeah, and I was afraid if I got distracted with another year, make, and model brand or something like that, that I would never learn what I needed to know. And so I just kind of started just tapping that one note on the piano, and until I felt like I knew it and I understood it, and that just kind of started to morph from there.
Were you doing all the work yourself, or were you subbing it out to other shops in the
So
beginning?
it yeah, so initially, again, a little insight on myself is we initially took a truck, that baby blue one, and it had to have a hood painted. And so I took it to a shop and I said, "Hey, could you paint this hood and then put it on the truck for me and, just kind of finish it?" And a friend of mine that owned a paint shop, and he did, and it took like 6 months, to paint a hood. I was like, man, and he's a collision shop, let's be honest, and so I was just like, this isn't really ideal because I better just learn how to paint my own stuff. And so
You learned about paint gel real fast.
yeah, yeah. And so we just set up a little homemade tent again, started painting our own stuff. I didn't know enough mechanical stuff to fix everything on a truck. So I thought, well, maybe I'll hire a guy that likes to tinker. So I hired this guy named Dave, and I think we hired him for like $16 an hour. It was a mechanic, paint guy. We would just figure it out together, but he knew
Now,
enough and taught.
was this at your house, or did you already have a shop at this point?
Well, we had so my again, I'll contribute a lot of the blame on how I got into this on my father-in-law. He had he had a little 5,000, we'll call it little, but it was 5,000 square foot shop that we were just tinkering in. We shared it between me, my brother-in-law, my father-in-law, and we were just kind of putting stuff in it, storing it, and just kind of playing around with stuff. And so it kind of started there. And so that's where the painting kind of started inside. I kind of took over the shop for a while and started doing a lot in it before we had to rent a secondary location to do the painting in it because that was proved to be too messy. But so that kind of helped us, you know, keep some of our overhead down for a little while we, I tried to figure out if this was something that I actually wanted to do.
Now, was this still in the Phoenix area?
Yeah, it's still in Gilbert, Arizona. Yep.
Okay.
And that original location is only like 7 minutes from where we are now.
Okay. So you started, like you said, buying and flipping and stuff. When did you
Hmm.
realize that this is going to be my quote unquote job from now on?
Uh, boy, I was trying to figure out how to turn it into one. I, because I like to be creative, I'm somewhat artistic. I wouldn't say I'm extremely artistic, but my brain at least thinks that way. And so I found myself just really enjoying it, and it didn't feel like a job at all. It just
Yeah.
felt fun, you know. It's kind of why we all do it because it is fun. And so I I had a customer that asked us to put his truck together, and it didn't go so well. That was a hard lesson, for both of us, to go through. I had no idea how to, put one together for someone else. I just knew how to do it for myself, and so that was a little bit of a hard lesson. The next one we did, you've probably seen it a little bit, but the very next vehicle we did was a guy in Arizona that had he had a '56 Ford, and it was a stake bed that was yellow original. It was all original, and he wanted us to build that for him. And so this was like the customer number two. And I said, sure. And then I had heard a little bit about fuel injection swaps because I've heard of people doing LSs and stuff. I'd never done one. And they looked real fun and cool and like they worked well. And I was pretty excited about it. But I just had a hard time putting an LS in the Ford. So like I think 2015 was about when this was happening, and we decided to figure out the coyote stuff, in a Ford.
That's
So
probably about the time that was becoming super popular with swaps and stuff, wasn't it?
yeah, yeah, swaps were starting to come out. The engine had been out since like late 2011, 12. It only been out really a couple years,
Still
when
pretty new.
It was still pretty new engine, and people were still trying to figure out how to make it work. And you couldn't do a 6 speed. Everything was just really limited to what you could do back then. And anyway, so we took it on, and we figured it out. And it was kind of a total pain in the neck. And because having never done fuel injection, for me, I was just studying anything I could find on the internet that would help us get through it. And so to this day, it still comes to the shop and it still looks pretty good. And we do a little bit of service on it. And I look back and I'm shocked that we even pulled it off, and it's okay. But we painted it. We did the whole thing on it. And so that was kind of, we were outsourcing, upholstery and, a few things we were still outsourcing when we finally took that on. But for the most part, I thought I didn't really make much money, but I thought maybe if I stuck with it, maybe I could figure it out. And so that's about where I decided let's go all in and see if we can figure it out. And it's way harder than, you know, people tell you it is. It's
Oh
like
yeah.
it's pretty challenging.
So what would you say would in your mind would be the first truck that puts you on the map? Because now you dominate that map.
Yeah, so the first truck that put us on the map, I think, believe it or not, was a C10. Even though we were doing a lot of Fords, uh, it was kind of weird. We were doing a ton of Fords and doing a lot of Coyote swaps for people. But when we first went to SEMA, we took a C10, and there was a gray and white truck we had built with a friend of ours named Keith Roselle, and it was called Elaine.
Okay.
And so we built that truck and took it to SEMA. First time I went to SEMA, it was with the C10. So I wasn't really biased, but it was an opportunity to try to go do something different and on a little bigger stage.
What
And it
year
was
was
in,
this?
I think, 2016.
Okay. Whose booth was it in?
So we were in McGuire's booth outside.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that was
And that's
it,
one of those hard to get into. Like you have to be a certain caliber to be there.
yeah. I mean, it was the outdoor booth, not the indoor booth. The indoor booth is
Still though.
extremely, yeah. But we had developed a relationship with McGuire's somehow, previously to our first customer. Um, And it's, a lot of this business, I think, is just about making relationships, and so making good relationships. And so we had gone, a friend of mine, he does a little truck driving for us today. A good friend of his is a regional sales guy for McGuire's. And I said, hey, I want to go to Del Mar with the truck, and do you want to come with me? And so he said, yeah. And then he looked it up and saw that McGuire's was like the sponsor of the Del Mar show in McGuire's, or in Del Mar, and the Good Guys show, I should say. And so his name is Jason Philly. And so Jason Philly is like, hey, why don't you put your truck in our booth? And so that was how that relationship began. That was like 2000, like 15.
Okay.
And so we had developed that relationship, and they were super nice, and we just made good connections with them. And so when we were looking for a SEMA spot, we used that same relationship because that was the only one we had. We didn't have any others, and we went to SEMA with that, and they gave us a spot in their outdoor truck, and it worked out, and it just happened to be. And we actually have a truck in their booth nearly every year now since then.
Well, now you probably have to pick and choose who you actually get to use because I'm sure everybody's reaching out to you now.
Yeah, you would think so. It's actually harder than you think. And the way SEMA goes now is there's less vendors now, and so there's a lot
Uh-huh.
more people trying to get in to SEMA, and and I won't say I'm over SEMA, but I am more picky about what we take and what we want to do there now than I used to be. And so if it's something that is really close to being done and that feels like we can make it without too much pulling our hair out, then we'll try to
SEMA Crunch.
coordinate. Yeah, that's SEMA Crunch. We've done it 2 or 3 times, and I don't know that it is really beneficial for anyone, other than the commitment you made to the vendor. And I think that's the most important thing is, making it for that. But I don't know that it's great for us. It's not great for the client's truck, because then you got to bring it back and kind of, go
Yep.
through it again. But so we're
I've
trying
said
to
on
stay,
here.
yeah,
I've
we're
said on
trying
here
to stay
many a
away.
time. it's always SEMA done
Yeah, yeah. And I'm
if
tired.
it's there.
Yeah, I don't want to do SEMA done anymore. So we have one truck that we're taking this year for sure. It's a 1959 uh, Ford four-wheel drive pickup truck.
Okay.
Um, and it runs and drives currently. So we're not finished with it. We haven't done the upholstery on it, but it's in a good position to where I feel like, okay, I think this is one we can take. So,
Well, how long did you keep you and that the one mechanic you hired on? Was it just you two for a while?
it was him. Then we hired a painter, and then we hired a couple different mechanics, a couple different painters. And it took me a while to kind of find a good like team of people that I could trust. And so, and I'm super picky, and so I'm really picky about like relationships and culture and just people getting along. And so there's a lot of ego in the hot rod world,
Yeah.
and and so for me, I don't really have a lot of like desire to just fight that. I just want to just like work with good people and have a good time and build cool stuff. And I don't mind sharing, what we do, how we do, like I just want to be like I kind of feel like, I if you think you're great, that's just a sign of, ego and vulnerability that is going to get you one day. You need to be a little bit more down to earth and willing to help others. So we have people that come to our shop all the time, and there are other shops from other places, and we give them a tour, and I tell them they can ask any question they want. That I don't have anything to really hide, and so we try to help other shops as much as we can, and open up, as much as I've learned and try to share it, just because I feel like, when I need that help, I hope somebody will, do the same for me, because there's things that, we struggle with as well. So.
Yeah. You get that one thing you can't get to work right, and somebody else has already done it a dozen times, so they,
I
they
know.
know the trick to make it
Yeah.
happen.
We actually had that come up recently. We had a Borla, those little injectors on top, the throttle
Yeah.
bodies, the eight stack, and we thought it was really cool. It was a truck we took to SEMA last year. It was a bare metal truck we did, and it was super awesome truck. We just couldn't get it to run right. It was real sticky throttle. God, we just went through, greased everything, went through it, checked the vacuum, and I was like, I need some help. This is like call a friend thing, like I gotta stop. We gotta stop messing with this. And so we talked to Borla several times, and we were struggling with just trying to get a lot of answers out of them, mostly just talking to the wrong person. And so then I talked to Kevin Scheel, who is Kev Dog on Bitchin' Rides. And so I called him up and I said, "Hey, Kevin, I need a favor. I know you guys use this type of stuff a lot. What's the trick here?" And he's like, "I don't know. Let me talk to my guys and I'll call you back." And so he then called me back and said, "Hey, talk to this guy at Borla, and I know we've had some problems, but call this guy here." And that's all it was. It was just really getting to the right person. And so when we talked to the person at Borla, he's like, "Yeah, we've had some problems. Send your whole thing back in. Let us fix it." And so, and we did, and it actually worked, like 80% better. And
Yeah.
so it was just, you get frustrated, and sometimes, you have to just like reach out to people that, have done things, and maybe they have an answer. And so I feel like that's how the industry should be. It's not always that way, but it's nice when it is.
I know Adam that's building my Blazer. He was a shop foreman down at Counts Customs, and they were building a vehicle for Borla for SEMA one year and had the same eight stack deal and had the same issue with it. And Borla actually had to come in and tweak it. So it must just be something with that particular item to get to run right, is just you got to hold your head right to make it work kind of thing.
It is. Well, you have all those, blades in there. If they get hung up at all, it can be really, really, tough. But
So when did you come up with the name Fat Fender Garage? Was that early on?
that was we came up with that pretty early. I I was trying to come up with a name, and I don't know if it was the right name or not, but it is the name we got now. And so I was just looking up. I'd look up like hot rod terminology, because I wanted it to be relatable. And so I just look up words, and I remember coming across Fat Fender Fords, and it kind of resonated with me because at the time I was, really heavy into the Fords. So, and I was doing a lot of the, Fat Fender rounded, trucks.
Yep.
So, so that was kind of where I thought I'll just do this, and I like the name of it, and we'll use it and throw the word garage on the end of it because it sounds a little bit better, and then we'll go with it. And so then I had to make sure we could get an Instagram page, and then make sure we could get a website.
Yeah.
I couldn't get uh, fatfender.com for the longest time because it was tied up, and then we finally were able to get fatfender.com about 3 years ago, and so
Nice.
that made it a little bit easier for some things, but yeah, that's kind of how it started.
Now, with you after that first SEMA build, did anything snowball for you at that point? And was that what the catalyst was to say, all right, we got to do more and more and higher caliber and step it to the next level?
Yeah, it taught me a lot about, builds in general and caliber. And as I go around SEMA, even today, I still go around. I'm just like, how do people continue to push the envelope like they do? It's
Yep.
just, it's an inspiring place to go and see. And so every year, if we went to SEMA, you were just inspired to be better. And you would look at the way people do things, maybe the way they did the body work. You just see people who are just, succeeding on such a high level. And then you're just trying to figure out, well, how do they do that? And so that was just kind of how, you just ask how, and you realize, well, maybe this guy's not going to cut it. We're going to have to get somebody a little bit different working for us because, you're only going to be as good as the people you employ. And so we had to realize we had to employ, better people. We had to pay, higher wages. Um, to recruit those people, and then which meant in order to pay higher wages, we had to be able to charge enough money to justify, that. So you had to be producing that quality of level, that level of quality that it needed to be. And so it's just kind of this, just trying to jockey, those several things, to get better and better.
You're right though. What you look at the caliber stuff, and it's every year it's something new, and it's. I mean, you can only build the same truck the same so many times, but then you walk by one and go, "Wow, they've changed the whole body line on that." That's something I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
have thought of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty cool, and I'm just glad it's an industry that is striving for, that type of, uniqueness and quality. They're really hard. Those types of builds are extremely difficult, and they're challenging on budgets, they're challenging on time, they're challenging just on so many different levels. And so um I don't mind doing them. I just don't like doing a lot of those at one time.
Yeah.
I used to be real dark hair before I got started, and now I've got gray hair from all that stuff.
Dude, you don't look bad for 29 though. So,
Yeah, well, I wish. 53. 53.
so with having to push that envelope to go further, did you ever think that these vehicles, when you first got into it, were going to be several $100,000 million builds, million plus builds?
I did, and I always thought like 150, 200,000 was like the top, when we first
That
started.
was
I was
always a
like,
Lambo or a Ferrari. Like, that was
yeah,
the only thing that was that back in the day.
yeah. I thought if you did something in that neighborhood, you know built the Taj Mahal at that point, and so and then as you started to just do more, you realize, oh, you can do more, and you can spend as much as you want to spend, and we've broke the seven figure, number one time
Yeah.
with the Ford pickup truck, and I was just like, geez, then you start thinking of some of those builds that, you see out there like at Ring Brothers or something like that, you're just like, yeah, many millions of dollars to get to some of those, types of builds. And it's cool that there's people out there that like to build that stuff. That's what's actually cool, is there's people out there that love to build that kind of stuff and want to pay for that kind of stuff to be built. And so I think it's cool. So what kind of keeps it exciting.
Now I know seeing the caliber jump like that, I guess everybody thought when the industry kind of slowed down that it was going to slow down and hurt a lot of people. But I think when you go to that level of build, that's a whole different demographic of buyer per se. And that I don't see that market dying off anytime soon.
Yeah, I got a truck beeping. Can you hear that beeping?
It's fine.
Okay.
Barely.
Barely. Okay. So I have wondered that same thing. I think it will slow up a little bit. I mean, it has to, just because there's going to be some concern, in the market that just may slow it up a little bit, but it doesn't seem to be, affecting, those caliber of bills, those high-end bills. They don't really seem to be slowing because those people aren't as affected by the market.
Yeah.
They've reached a point where they've already made their money. They're not, still trying to, work the 9 to 5 job every day. They're kind of past that point. So for them, it's just, they're maybe not making as much money, but they're still, all their investments are still doing really well. But like I'd say today's economy is definitely struggling a little bit, and definitely causing, people to second guess, whether they buy parts today or wait for another month. I think that's kind of a little bit of a struggle, but for us, we've just tried to diversify in several different areas to make sure that we, don't get caught in, when the down economy comes, we can still kind of
Yeah.
keep going and stay out of debt. Quite frankly, that's one of the things that we've learned. At least I learned in my last business. Try to stay out of debt. Big fancy shops are great, equipment's great, all that stuff's really important. But if it's just saddled with a bunch of debt, the economy can crush you. And so we focused really hard to just not take on hardly any debt as we do it.
Now, when did you move to the new building? That was within the last year, wasn't it?
That was probably about in 2024. It was April 1st, April 2nd, right around there, 2024, when we moved into the new shop.
Now, what's the
And so,
size difference between this one and the one you moved out of?
so the one we were in was 15,000 square feet, and we were there for about 6 years. And
That was
we'd
after the
outgrown.
original 5,000 square foot shop with your family.
Yes, yeah, we outgrew that one probably about 2 years prior. About year four, we had outgrown it. But keep in mind, it was, things are going crazy with COVID and real estate, and everything was just going up. And so I had a difficult time trying to decide whether or not we should keep paying these, prices as they were going up. And then at some point, we had to say, if we don't, it may just chase right out of our price range. It's just going to get too expensive. So we moved in, like I said, almost 16 months ago. And we went from 15,000 to about 42,000.
Wow.
And then from there we just had to get used to it, some changes, and now we filled it all up, and now we're out of space again.
Now time to add on to the building, huh?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready for more. I'm not really ready for more risk, I guess I should say. I'd like to see a little bit more what's happening in the world, and if things can stabilize a little bit. It's just a little bit, there's things that I can control, and so and there's things I can't control, and so I got to be careful.
Yeah.
Keeping that balance in check.
Well, a lot of people don't know because I didn't know till I went to go pick up my Porterbuilt stuff. How did that relationship with Nate go through to where Fat Fender and Porterbuilt are in the same building now?
So we sell chassis for Nate, and so we sell all the Ford chassis. That was a project we started several years ago, where we
Okay.
would help split and fund the ability to build Ford chassis. And so a lot of the design work and those costs associated with it were things that he and I would split. And so he would manufacture it and we would sell it. It was kind of the arrangement we had made. In the course of it, he was feeling a little frustrated with the location he was at. He was in like 4 separate buildings out on a dirt road, and he wanted to kind of elevate his brand a little bit. And so we made some space to bring him in, and so just so that we could kind of two things. One, keep perfecting the system of chassis designing and building, speed up the process of a new chassis going to market and working through all the bugs. And so we kind of worked together on that, and it's gone pretty well. I think the biggest struggle we've had is just getting enough people to help us with the projects that we have going. And so we have about 7 full-time engineers that work there. A couple of them are his. We have about 5 that work for us. And so just going through, just designing them and, just trying to get them built. But it was just kind of, we've been just good friends for a long time. And it's just really ended up being just something that, I like Nate. He's very honest and trustworthy and builds a good product. And so we felt it would be useful and helpful for both of us.
Just to be in the same building.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you said the engineers, I'm sure that wasn't something when you first started this that you thought you'd have to have on payroll is multiple engineers.
No, we're looking to hire probably another one soon. So in the very beginning, I talked about I like to create things and be, where I can come up with ideas. And so even though I can come up with an idea, somebody has to make it. And then it's got to be designed and made. And so then I was like, well, how are we going to do that? And so we learned how to use SolidWorks. We learned how to do 3D printing. We had to find machine shops that we could do stuff for us. And so as that started to develop, things that we needed, it also allowed us to, bring a lot of parts to market that we can assist people with, having the same parts we use that they can just purchase and put on their own vehicle.
So in that aspect, since you start with the chassis stuff in-house, is there anything you don't do in-house now?
So we don't, all of our powder coating is done outside. We have a company that picks stuff up and brings it back. But aside from that, we do all of our interiors in-house. We do Cerakoting in-house, painting in-house, all the body work, metal fabrication, pretty much everything that goes into it. Things like, there's certain things machining. We'll outsource, the machine shops and billet parts that we need made. We'll do that, but I don't really want to get into. I don't really want to be a machine shop. We have enough things that we do that there's plenty of guys that's controlled enough for me that we don't need to take that on.
Now I know you've got something that I've personally never seen in a shop is your assembly line setup. So explain how your assembly line setup works, which you mentioned it keeps your guys on track and what's what, but it was almost like a custom version of a Ford or OEM, assembly line.
Yeah, and it's new for us this last year. What we've decided to do is try to take the concepts. For instance, if I go to a guy in the shop and I say, "Can you do body work on this for me?" Right? And he'll say, "Yeah, we'll get it done." Well, there's this amount of time that I thought it would take this long. He thinks it should take this long, right? And I only wanted, this kind of a quality for this particular job because I know the scope of the job. But he's always wanting to push here. He wants to push himself to be better and better and better. And so what happens is we have this gap now of where he and I differentiated on what we thought was going to happen. And so the expectation is wasn't clear, right? He didn't understand it. I didn't explain it very well, whatever it is. We both got the job accomplished, but maybe it wasn't within the scope of what we were hoping it would, be done. Because we have a customer who's paying bills, right? And
Yep.
we're charging them, and we have to be sensitive, and we have to, make sure that we're acknowledging, where this customer wants to be and how much he wants to spend, and and try to have some internal budgets that help us manage that. And so we got to the point where we needed to figure out ways to manage expectations. And so we needed to start being clear to our techs what that expectation is up front, and always have that there for them to understand what that expectation is and analyze it. So we started coming up with stations and computer screens and monitors that we can then project that information out to them. They can see the allotted time that we have allowed for that, and then they can let us know what it actually took. And
Yeah.
so we can start monitoring that a little bit more real time and keeping track of what it is that we're trying to get done and by when. They understand the goal, and they're not in trouble if they go an hour over or anything like that. It's just understanding what the goal is and what we want to accomplish, and so that we can anticipate, when things are going to move through the shop, when they'll be done, and keep track of that instead of like just this ambiguous, you know, number that nobody knows, and how long is it going to be here? And it could be 1 month, 3 months, just, it'll be done when it's done, right? And we wanted to be able to manage that a little bit differently.
So I guess like your exhaust guy's always in the same exhaust bay, your wiring guy's always in the same wiring bay every day.
Mm-hmm.
They just bring the
Yep.
new truck in once that one's done.
Correct. Yeah, we bring the products to them, not them to to the project. And so it actually, helps them stay just real consistent with what they do. My wiring guy doesn't wire the entire thing. He wires most of it, and then it goes to another station, and then the guy does like the headlights and tail lights and marker lights, and he gets all that stuff put in and make sure the horn works, and he wraps up all the the little things. But it's just kind of a process that we're striving to perfect and get better at, so that we can predict our workload a little bit better, and predict time frames and be able to get things to the shop in a more of an organized, efficient way.
Does that help you get stuff out quicker versus telling somebody, hey, I'm going to need it 4 years kind of thing?
It does, yeah. It depends on the build and the customer and what we're trying to accomplish, but it can definitely speed the process up, and in a lot of ways that helps keep the cost down. And so those are the two things that people with money will want more than anything is if they have a lot of money, they don't care what it costs, then they're focused on time,
Yeah.
right? Because they're used to having money buy time for them. They can have it now. But if time isn't the issue and they're okay, then they might be focused on, well, budget. And so, but most of the time, they really, really want it done sooner than later. And so just being able to, commit to those things and push them through the shop more organized is what helps us accomplish that.
How long of a wait list are you running right now?
It depends on what it is. Lately hasn't been as long as it's been, so we probably anywhere from 6 months to a year.
Oh, wow, that's pretty short. But I guess with the team you have and the layout you have, it probably streamlines that.
Yeah, it does. So we're constantly, it changes. If we were just a 4-man shop, then we'd be booked out. 10-man shop, then we'd be booked out 4 years. So but it's different when you have 55 people working there.
Is
So
that how
it
many you have on your
mm,
side, not counting
yeah,
Nate's side?
not Nate's side. No, no, we have 55 people, and so you
Wow.
end up moving through the projects faster. So when you do that, it requires a pretty good marketing team to help keep feeding the shop.
Well, I know when I went and picked my parts up, y'all had several chassis and stuff sitting back there in the end. It's like just to sit and look at how your stuff's put together with the engines already in them, with the wire and ready to put the bodies on. Like that was pretty impressive the way they were already done. And so it's like that showed your level of build without it being a complete build, which most people don't get to see that aspect of a build is just the chassis
Hmm.
side.
Yeah, we have customers that, will purchase those completed, ready to just put their body on it because they feel like that's something that they could do themselves. But not having to hassle with all the chassis and the powder coating, the brake lines, fuel lines, air lines, whatever it is they're doing, but just being able to have all that ready to go, the engine. We've even had some customers after it's all together, they'll say, "Hey, could you fire it up and so I know that it runs?" And
Yeah.
so my guy will spend a day, he'll bring in the engine run stand that we have, and he'll fire it up, and we'll show him that it runs. We'll show him it's got fuel pressure, and they're they're good to go. So it's that kind of stuff, especially when we put superchargers on them. They're like, hey, can you make sure the supercharger runs, just in case we did something wrong. And so they'll pay the extra money to have us do that. And it's always fun to kind of fire those up every now and then.
Yeah. Well, I know you've been pushing the four-wheel drive stuff quite a bit lately. Is that where you see the market going?
I do for a while. I mean, we're starting to, you know, go where the market goes, right? And you just have to kind of follow that a little bit. I mean, it used to be 32 Fords, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what it used to be, but the market changes and you just kind of have to keep learning to adapt. And so I think Ford four-wheel drive trucks are going to be pretty popular for a while. The next 5 years, they're just even the Chevys, four-wheel drive Chevys and Blazers. You see the Blazers, guys out there doing the Blazers are doing a great job, and so it's just creating, another market, if you will, that wasn't as popular, but it's becoming popular. Um, the two-wheel drive will always still be popular, but the four-wheel drives are taking off. I think there's some other things that are coming up. We're starting to push into the car market a little bit. I bought a Fox body Mustang,
which is
so
which has become huge right now.
yeah, and so we're going to design a chassis for that. And I think we're going to get into designing parts and interiors and all kinds of stuff for those. Those are kind of cool. And then I've got the Jeep Grand Wagoneer. I bought one of those. And so we're going to design some, kind of get into those. And we got some Dodges. And so we're just kind of at the point now where we just want to start expanding into other stuff. I've kind of been satiated with all the trucks and feel pretty content that we have a pretty good handle on that. So I feel like, we're in a place where we can start, expanding the business into other elements.
So how was the design and, like I said, with the engineers, that process to create that new four-wheel drive chassis that you just come out with? Like, did you just take a stock one and scan it and make measurements and then just try to make it modern on that aspect?
Yeah, so when you're designing it, and obviously, we're working with Nate, he's really great at designing, Nate with Porterbuilt. You 3D scan the body, you 3D scan the chassis. You're mostly looking for, body mount points, making sure you hit all those so people can put their bodies on it pretty easily. You're trying to figure out a couple different engines that might go in it so that you can accommodate those. With four-wheel drive, there's several different transfer cases you have to deal with. There's drive shaft angles, and the shorter the wheelbase, the steeper the angles. And so
Yeah.
there's a lot more that goes into it in a four-wheel drive than a two-wheel drive. It's definitely more challenging, and you have, just a different type of suspension that you have to figure out and what that ride quality is going to be like. And so some of those are, they're new things, and we've got a few projects out there where we've sent them out there, and I suspect there'll be some tuning issues where some springs will need to be changed, and so we want to work closely with them so we can kind of dial in the weights and the of the truck and the spring rates, and make sure we understand the ride quality that they were after, and the changes. And so we'll be documenting all that stuff as we go, but plus the ones we're building in shop, documenting all that stuff. So at the very end, we want it to be something that is comfortable, rides great on asphalt, and does well on dirt, but doesn't have a lot of the weird squat and nose diving scenarios. It's a little bit different. It's kind of fun. I drive a four-wheel drive pickup truck every day, and so that's it makes sense to just kind of get into that stuff.
I don't see many of your customers taking their stuff off road and beating on them though. So
Now that's why we have to have them good for asphalt, because they're basically you know that's where they're going to spend most of their life. Occasionally
yeah.
you build something that goes off road, but not often.
Where do you see the future of Fat Fender Garage go? I know you mentioned about bringing the other items in, but is it something you want to grow even more down the road, or are you content with the size you have now?
I am content with where we're at now, but also at the same time, in order to just keep my brain active and going, I'm always like that creative side. I'm looking to create like new opportunities. And so we're looking at pushing our interior business pretty high the remainder of this year. We plan to, by the end of this year, have nice interior kits for all the Chevy, GMC, Ford trucks, Blazers, Broncos. Those
Like
will all
plug and play
be
interiors?
plug and play. And so we're going to be pushing on that. We'd be pushing a lot on parts over the next, several years and developing um, more chassis. And then pushing on, still doing the one-off builds, but then also doing some assembly line builds that we're starting to do now, where we're taking some of those projects of people that they're just looking for a quick swap my body over, make it
Right.
run and go. And so we're looking at assembly lining that as well. And so we're working on, just getting those, projects like that where we can push them through the shop fairly quickly and get those done. I suspect we'll have to, take on more space, within the next year. We'll just wait until that time makes sense.
How many vehicles do you usually have in the works at any given time?
Generally about 25 roughly in the shop at any time being worked on that are
That's
in the
crazy.
build process.
That's still crazy to me to have that many and still be able to manage parts for what's what. And it's hard enough doing one myself. Like I couldn't imagine having 25, but I guess you have different people that control different aspects
We
of it.
we do. We have people over upholstery, people over chassis, people over different builds, and we have team leads out there. So that's how you get up to 55 people real quick.
So, do you have a favorite vehicle that you've turned out over the years? I know you said the first one you had at SEMA was kind of one of the first to kind of put you on the map per se, but do you have
Mhm.
one that's like that's the vehicle?
Um, hmm, Not really. There's one that we're building in the shop right now. It's mine, and it's a 1971 Ford. It's a bump side. It's got a long bed, service bed on it. It's got a camper shell on it. It's got we're putting a Godzilla in it, and it's a pretty heavy truck, but that's one that I'm kind of enjoying right now the most, because it's one I'm actually building for myself, and I plan on keeping. And so when we build things for other people, it's we build it as if it's our own, but it's never yours. It's theirs,
Yeah.
and at some point you're gonna have to let that go. And so you try not to get too attached to those things. But as far as builds go, like I just really enjoy the process of building them and designing them. And so sometimes it's like the next one is the fun one, and it could even be simpler than some of the other ones. But it's just, it's fun to work with good people. It's not fun to work with people that, you know, get mad, and so you try to navigate those things. Not every customer loves us, at the end, and it's
Yeah.
just sometimes the nature of the beast. We strive real hard to, fulfill all our obligations and make everybody happy, but sometimes it's, that can be challenging. So, but at the end of the day, just, really doing what you say you're going to do, and being, honest and transparent is just what I've learned is kind of the saving grace, just in any business. It's just do what you say you're going to do, and sometimes we have to eat some stuff on our end, because maybe we goofed up or something like that. But
Part of
um,
doing business.
it's just part of doing business, and so we have a lot of great customers that, yeah, it's the saddest part. I always tell them when we're done is that we won't get to talk every day anymore. It's just because we put 1,000 miles on them and we give them to them, and then they don't really have like a lot of problems with them. And so that's the hardest part is you develop these, just you talk to them 2 or 3 times a week. You're texting, you're just engaged with them on this project, and then when the project's done, it's done. And then you're like just checking in with them like months later. And you're like, hey, how's it going? You're just like, it's just kind of weird, and you want to keep those relationships going, but it's not, it's done, and it's what it
It,
is.
is that your norm is putting 1,000 miles on projects when they're done?
It is pretty much standard. Very rarely will something get past us where I agree for less than 1,000. It just depends on, the project, but pretty much that's the norm. It's a little tedious because we got to protect the paint and, try to wrap up the nose a little bit in different
I've seen
areas
your
where.
videos of them rolling with them all taped up and the fenders taped up
Yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff.
and everybody, it's kind of funny because all the, social media be like, why would you drive a truck? You gotta like protect it all the time, or everyone's just, and they just don't understand that we're actually cranking miles out on it, and then when we're done, we'll pull all that off. We'll fix any paint chips and then give it to the customer. And he may put a PPF on it. He may do whatever he wants to do with it. But for us, we're obligated to protect the paint and make sure it's safe, and that's just part of getting the miles done. And when you're putting 1,000 miles on that, there's a lot of opportunity for a rock chip or two.
Oh yeah.
And it happens. And we've had some doozies, rock chips, and you're just like, I've had broken glass, hit the windshield, and you're putting a new piece of glass in, and it happens. But at the end, when the 1,000 miles is done, I feel pretty confident that they're going to be able to take it and drive it and enjoy it.
Well, that's what the guy doing my Blazer. I told Adam, I said, put 1,000 miles on it because he's in Las Vegas. I'm in North
Mhm.
Carolina. So it's like I would rather something happen 20 minutes from his shop
Yeah,
than maybe 2,300 miles from his shop and something go wrong.
yeah. It's
I mean,
it's
something can
wise to
always
do
go
that.
wrong, but
Yeah, it can, but it's less likely to go wrong. If you've got 1,000 miles that have tested it, you'll hardly he'll hardly have anything go wrong, and you'll be happier, right? You'll feel better about it. You'll have more enjoyable experience. Those that put 10, 25, 30 miles on it, 100 miles or less, they're usually back into the shop, within a week or two, easily. And if not the next day, you turn it over to
yeah.
someone. And so, for us, you just hate to be done with something, think you're done, and then just it's back for another month or two.
Yeah. So from someone that's gone from a 5,000 square foot family garage to where you're at now, for someone coming up trying to create their own thing like that, what
Hmm.
advice do you have for that younger person trying to do what you've done?
Well, you're going to have to work harder than most people. That's It's not going to come with just all luck. There's going to be some luck along the way that pops up with relationships and those types of things, and just meeting people. And so, be kind to everybody. Be honest. Be transparent. Work really hard to do the very best job you can, and then just keep looking to ways to expand your business. For us, it was moving into the parts business. It was learning to just, take on a few more things on our own rather than sub it out. But I would say just hire a good team, you know. But the number one thing that I would say most importantly, if you're going to get anywhere and with any kind of success, is you better know your numbers.
What do you mean by better know your numbers?
If you don't know the data of how much money you're making, what it's costing you to do it, what your overhead is, how much you should be charging per hour, based on all those factors, you're never going to make it. It's not a guessing game. You can't wing it. It's not something like, well, I'll just charge this much and I'll bring some business in. You may not be charging enough and you may not survive. And so, in order to be successful in business, you have to make money in business. You have to.
That's very good advice there.
So know your numbers, and if you aren't a number person, that's okay. Then you need to hire someone that is. And
How how much of the time are you actually on or hands on now, or you don't have time for that?
so hands on. So I'll do some of the wood beds that pop up. I'll still do some of those. Um, I am out in the shop, like going over projects and discussing things with them, and designing. But like physically doing work, not very much anymore.
Do you miss being hands on like you were in the beginning?
I don't. No. I don't. And that's just because I was never like a true mechanic, if you will. I was just
Yeah.
a weak one at best. And so anytime I could hire somebody that was better than me, I was so thrilled about it because it was always stretching my talents. I can design stuff and I can come up with a lot of good ideas, and I can keep the big picture. I can keep that in my mind and see the end, from the beginning and all that kind of stuff. I'm really good at that stuff, but I'm just not as good at it as my guys are. They're just better at it. And sometimes they're like, "Hey, take that hammer out of Jason's hand," Sometimes they give me a hard time about it, and And I'm like, give me that paint gun. I'll go in here and paint this for you. And they start laughing and joking, and I've painted full vehicles, and I could probably figure it out again, but they just do a better job than I do, and I really appreciate that. I really, really like knowing that my guys are just they're just that good, and I can count on them.
Well, I've had people say to me, well, you don't turn your own wrenches and this and that. And it's like, no, but I'm the same way. I know what that end project's going to look like in my mind.
Hmm.
I know what process needs to go to make it happen, but I also know what I'm capable of doing and what I'm not capable of doing. And let the
Yeah. What?
pros do.
So tell me what year is your Blazer?
77.
77. Okay.
Yeah.
Is it two wheel, four wheel?
Was four-wheel drive. When I
Okay.
bought it, the front had like a first gen Porterbuilt bag setup on it, and the rear still had a
Okay.
3-inch lift on it. Like it
Okay.
was just already a project. So it was just weird stink bug looking, but
Yeah.
it's all coilover, decided to go that route with it. And
Nice.
I wanted to do air, but it was like, I also like the drivability of the coilover. You don't have to
Right.
worry about it.
Hmm.
So
I've learned with coils, not all coils are created equally, and so I've learned that after we get done with the vehicle, we'll weigh the vehicle, and then we'll tune the vehicle with coil springs. And so a lot of times we'll go in because some vehicles are just heavier than others,
yeah.
and then we'll go change all the spring rates around until we get the drivability and comfort that we really like. And so that's one thing I've learned just on coilovers is just be willing to make changes, if you have to.
Well, Beltec's getting ready to release a new coilover line. They're using my Blazer to bring it to market. So we're basing the spring rate stuff off of like Nate's recommendations for the C10 versus the Blazer or whatever. But
Hmm.
like one of their R&D guys is actually going to come drive the Blazer once we get it drivable
Oh,
and do the same thing and be like, all right, whatever we need to change, we'll
yeah.
change.
Yeah, that's cool. That's the way to do it because I think sometimes you don't realize you can change the way it rides tremendously by just a few changes in, could be 25 pounds, 50 pounds in a spring rate, and it can just really make all the difference in the world. Then you get the function of like, the rebounds and stuff like that you want to adjust, have that adjustable. Once you have the ability to, make those adjustments, they can ride actually really well.
That's
Yeah.
the plan. I think the body and the frame rails are the only thing that we're keeping stock on it. So
Hmm.
still keeping the patina, but I just want something I can drive, have fun with, and not be like, oh my gosh, I got this scratch on the hood. Like I'm
Right,
extreme
right.
world.
Hmm.
Don't want a
Yeah.
trailer queen. I want something to drive.
Well, that's exciting. When do you think it'll be done?
We're hoping September-ish. I'm actually flying out a week from yesterday uh,
Hmm.
to Vegas to help because one of my best friends is building it. I'm actually staying with him for like a month, and we're
Okay.
gonna do all the big stuff. And then I come home and he does the stuff that like you don't need an extra set of hands for.
Okay.
So, which in turn lets me get content and video for build partners and
Yeah.
myself and everything.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting.
Which that's why when we come out by your shop, it was like I landed and like Nate messaged me and said, "Hey, your kit's done. It should have been done a week before." He said something happened. I'm like, "Whatever. It's all good. We got
Yeah.
other stuff to do." And I was like, "Well, we'll just come get it. We're 4 hours away." So we
Right.
went out there, stayed the night, picked it up, come home, and had everything installed before we could have shipped it there. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. That's
so yeah,
cool. I'm excited to see that finished and done.
that's it's tough being gone that much because I was already spent a couple weeks in March, a couple weeks in April out there working on it.
Hmm.
But now we're to the part like we should have within the first couple weeks on there. We should have the chassis blown back apart, ready for powder. So
Well, you'll be close. That's the hard, once you can finally put it together and powder coat it, put it together, and it's the last time it has to go together. That's the exciting part.
it's been fun. It's been challenging because everything I've always done for SEMA has always been a brand new vehicle with paper tags on it when we start messing with it. So to have something
Hmm.
that's almost 50 years old, it's a first for me.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to go this route.
Well, that's cool. Well, good for you.
So tell people that don't already follow you, which if they don't, they're must be living under a rock. But tell people how they find you online, your website, and your social media stuff.
Yeah, you bet. So, I mean, we have a website. You can go check us out there. If you're interested in, products and services that we offer, just, fatfender.com. We're on Instagram, Fat Fender Garage, Facebook. Um, my social media guy tells me we're on TikTok, so I'll take his word for it. Um, and I think we have 100,000 followers on TikTok or something like that. I don't think I've even been to it one time. So it's just
I was
not.
shocked that I got you on Instagram and I messaged you the other day trying to get you to come on. I was like, I figured it would be a social media guy. And he's like, oh,
It's
this is Jason. I'm like, oh, damn.
he
Okay.
what it's yeah, it's a little of both. He'll pester me like, hey, this guy, you got to respond to this guy. I'm like, yes, I got to get back with Brandon, and so I'll try to monitor, some of that, Instagram stuff a little bit. It's kind of fun just to see what everybody else is doing on, out there. But that's pretty much it. I mean, you can email us if you want to, info@fatfender.com. But yeah, all the usual places. You put in Fat Fender Garage, you'll find us.
Well, like I said at the beginning, you've become one of those premier shops in the country and turning out some of the most high end, most beautiful trucks and stuff out there. So it's good to
Well, thank
finally
you.
sit down and and link up with you and get you to tell your story.
Yeah, well, I'm in California right now, and we're on vacation, and so we're not in the shop. That's why you don't see the shop, obviously. But it's 70 degrees here, not 115,
So
and
you
so
wouldn't
we're
you wouldn't be sitting outside on a patio at the shop right now, is what you're
no
saying,
way, no way. I would only be in air conditioning. We actually have air conditioning in the shop, believe it or not.
which
So
is rare for most shops.
yeah, I just, air conditioning, 42,000 square feet is no small feat, but we keep it down at 85, so no humidity, 85. And I said, you guys will be fine. Just put a fan if you need anything more. But yeah, we're here on vacation in Carlsbad for a couple of weeks and just trying to stay out of the heat. My kids are out of school, and so we come here because I got to fly back. I got Wednesday. I have to be at a meeting back home, and so I'll have to fly back for a couple of days, and then I'll come back. So my wife knows that I can't take 2 weeks off entirely and just hang out. We got a
Yeah.
customer coming in to discuss their project, and so I have to be there for that. So
Well, like I said, thanks again for coming on and telling your story, and look
you
forward to
bet.
see
what
what
for having me.
turn out.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right, man. See ya.